Welcome to the Newsroom Forum. I'm your host, Sunny Angulo. Today's topic, residency hiring provisions. What are they, how can we enforce them, and how can we expand them? I'm joined in the studio today with Vincent Pan, the Executive Director of Chinese for Affirmative Action, and Jim Salinas, an Executive Officer with the San Francisco Carpenters Union, Local 22. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Our pleasure, Son.
So to get right to the point, maybe you could talk a little bit, Vincent, to start with, exactly what are residency hiring provisions?
Sure. Well, the basic principle is if you have San Francisco taxpayers who are supporting public construction projects or other private development in the city, that they ought to be able to work on these projects, both in the construction phase as well as the operational phase. And so even though different city agencies or different parts of the city may handle it differently, the essential idea is that if you're in the neighborhood, you should be able to get a job when there's something happening down the street or around the corner. The problem has been is that these laws aren't nearly strong enough and they aren't sufficiently enforced. And so even though—
So where are they in place in the city? I mean, is this a citywide policy, or is it specific to certain neighborhoods or specific to certain contracts, public or private?
Well, different parts of the city work differently, and so for the school district, they have different rules than the community college district, which has different rules from the Public Utilities Commission. I think that's actually one of the fundamental problems, is that because there are so many different rules, it's hard to keep track of who's actually doing a good job. The only thing that is consistent is that nobody's doing a particularly good job, and that over the years we've seen, not the type of attention that I think folks like myself and Jim would really like to see. Because local hiring provisions are also one of the best ways to make sure that communities of color, that women can actually have the same equal access to opportunities that others have had in the past.
Right. Jim, maybe you could give a specific example as somebody that works with workers, that represents them, of how community hiring practices have affected specific communities.
Well, if we're talking about and Vincent and I talk about these issues all the time, but I'll give you a case in point. We had, and I'm glad that Vincent mentioned private, because folks have a tendency to say, well, these residency hiring provisions only apply to public works, when in point of fact, I firmly believe that it applies to both public and private. And I'll use 3400 Cesar Chavez, which was a project that was opposed by the neighborhood on a very high level, and as a result of the fact that the developer, the project sponsor, came in and ultimately said, okay, well, we're willing to give a number of community benefits in order for the support. One of those benefits was to put the community to work, right? Because obviously in the Mission District, those jobs are not plentiful. We at the Carpenters Union have about 400 members in the Mission District, 400 members in the Baby Hunters Point. Those are the folks that all too often are not working on these projects. We're coming off we're on the tail end of $5.9 billion worth of construction in the unionized part of the construction industry in San Francisco today. Wow. Not counting the community college and the unified school district.
Not counting that.
Not counting that, which is probably closer to another $1 million worth of work at the end of the day. But folks in the communities of color have not fared well, and have not fared well for many, many years.
So who gets those jobs then?
Usually the contractor feels very, very comfortable bringing in folks from maybe Eureka, Sacramento, Visalia, Fresno.
I mean, why?
I oftentimes think that, if you have an individual on a crew for a lengthy period of time, if he's asked to do things outside of the parameters of the contract, then they're going to do that. That's what I think is happening. I'll tell you what sometimes happens, I think. And it may have happened on 3400 Cesar Chavez. A lot of the carpenters there were from Salinas. The wages in Salinas are different. So if you're not on top of that, something like that, you could just as easily have a union crew, members of the same brotherhood, working on a job site at a lesser rate. And sometimes that lesser rate is almost $5 or $6 an hour.
Wow.
So, why put the neighborhood to work when they're at $55 an hour and the folks from Salinas are maybe at something like $45 an hour?